The night air over Western Germany was cold and heavy, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and refuses to leave. It was late March 1945, and the war in Europe was supposed to be ending. That was the promise everyone kept repeating. But on this night, nothing felt like an ending. Engines growled in the dark, boots scraped over broken pavement, radios whispered half-heard messages. Somewhere ahead, tens of thousands of German soldiers were still armed, still organized, still dangerous. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. And one American general was about to do something so unexpected, so fast, that even his own commander would struggle to understand what had just happened. You can almost feel the tension pressing down on the ground that night. The Rhine River had been crossed. The German western defences had cracked, but the enemy was not gone, not even close. Entire German armies were still moving, retreating, regrouping, trying to escape east before the Allies could trap them. Every hour mattered, every road mattered. And standing at the centre of this chaos was Lieutenant General George S. Patton, commanding the US Third Army, moving faster than any force in Europe. Patton did not believe in slow endings. He believed in pressure. He believed in motion. And most of all, he believed that a beaten enemy was still an enemy until he was disarmed and surrounded. While other commanders talked about consolidation and cleanup, Patton looked at his maps and saw something else. He saw a closing fist. He saw a chance to end entire German formations in one violent sweep. And on this night, he was going to take it. Just days earlier, on March 22, 1945, Patton's Third Army had crossed the Rhine River near Oppenheim, south of Frankfurt. It was one of the most daring river crossings of the war. No long build-up, no massive publicity. Patton simply ordered it done. By the time higher headquarters fully realized what was happening, American tanks were already rolling deep into central Germany. That crossing cracked open the heart of the Reich. German command and control in the west began to unravel. As Patton's columns surged east and north, German units found themselves cut off, confused, and running out of options. Roads were jammed with retreating soldiers, horse-drawn wagons, trucks low on fuel, and columns of exhausted men who had been fighting non-stop for months. The Luftwaffe was gone. Artillery support was thin. Radio contact was unreliable. And many German officers no longer knew who was in command or where their neighbouring units were. They only knew one thing: the Americans were everywhere. By the evening of March 28th, Patton's intelligence officers began to notice something strange. German units were not just retreating, they were funneling into a narrowing pocket west of the Harz Mountains, in the region between Kassel and Paderborn. Roads converged there, rivers boxed the area in, and American armoured divisions were racing to seal it shut. What looked like scattered retreat was turning into a massive trap. Patton understood it immediately. This was not a normal surrender situation. This was a collapse. Entire German corps were being squeezed together with nowhere to go. And if the pressure was kept on through the night, the result would not be a series of small capitulations. It would be a mass surrender on a scale rarely seen in modern warfare. Most commanders would have slowed down. Night operations were risky. Units were tired. Supply lines were stretched. Friendly fire was a real danger. But Patton did not slow down. He ordered his armoured spearheads to keep moving. He pushed infantry divisions to march through the dark. He demanded roadblocks be thrown up at key crossings, bridges, and intersections before dawn. The orders went out fast. No pauses, no delays. Seal the exits. Cut the roads. Force the enemy to stop moving. By midnight, American units were already in position, blocking escape routes that German commanders believed were still open. By 2 a.m., more roads were closed. By 4 a.m., the pocket was sealed. Inside that pocket, panic spread. German officers realized they had driven straight into a cage. Attempts to break out failed almost immediately. Every direction led to American armor, American artillery or American infantry dug in along the roads. Fuel ran out. Ammunition was low. Radios crackled with desperate requests that went unanswered. As dawn approached, the truth became impossible to ignore. There was no escape. What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. As the first light of March 29, 1945, crept over the countryside, white flags began to appear. At first it was small groups, then battalions, then entire regiments. German soldiers stepped out from woods, fields and villages, hands raised, weapons left behind. American soldiers stared in disbelief as lines of prisoners stretched down the roads as far as they could see. This was not a battle anymore. It was a human flood. Tens of thousands of German soldiers surrendering within hours. Not after days of fighting, not after a long siege, but almost all at once, crushed by speed, confusion, and the sudden realization that the war, for them, was over. By mid-morning, reports began reaching Third Army headquarters. The numbers kept climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Staff officers thought there had to be a mistake. Prisoner counts were usually exaggerated in the chaos of combat. But these reports kept coming from different units, different locations, all saying the same thing. German formations were surrendering en masse. By early afternoon, the estimate crossed 50,000 prisoners taken in less than 24 hours. 50,000 men, captured in one night and one morning. When word of this reached Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, it stopped people cold. General Dwight D. Eisenhower had seen big numbers before. He had overseen the landings in Normandy, the breakout across France, and the long push into Germany. But this was different. This was not the result of a planned encirclement that took weeks to prepare. This was speed weaponized. This was a commander using momentum so aggressively that an entire enemy force simply collapsed. Eisenhower knew exactly who was responsible. And that knowledge came with mixed emotions. Patton had always been a problem and a weapon at the same time. Brilliant on the battlefield. Difficult everywhere else. He moved faster than plans allowed. He spoke before thinking. He embarrassed allies and superiors with his bluntness. And yet, again and again, his results were impossible to ignore. As Eisenhower read the situation reports, he understood what Patton had done. He had not just defeated German units. He had broken their will to fight by denying them time. No chance to reorganize, no chance to dig in, no chance to even understand what was happening. The German soldiers surrendered not because they were surrounded in the traditional sense, but because they realized resistance was pointless. Eisenhower reportedly turned to his staff and made a quiet remark that captured the moment. Not praise filled with excitement, not anger, something colder, something more measured. A recognition that Patton had once again proven his value, even if he did so in a way that made higher command uneasy. He acknowledged that Patton's speed had saved American lives. Every surrendered German soldier was one less enemy firing a weapon. Every unit captured intact meant fewer desperate last stands in towns and forests. Strategically, it was a success no one could argue with. But Eisenhower also saw the danger. Patton was proving that he could end battles faster than headquarters could track them. And that kind of independence in a coalition war came with risks that went beyond the battlefield. For the men on the ground, none of that mattered. American soldiers spent the rest of the day herding prisoners, guarding intersections, and trying to comprehend the scale of what had just happened. German soldiers sat on the roadside, exhausted, silent, staring at nothing. Some looked relieved, others looked hollow. The war had not ended with a dramatic last stand for them. It had ended with a traffic jam and a white flag. Patton, for his part, was already looking ahead. He did not celebrate. He did not slow down. To him, this was proof that the enemy was finished if pressure was kept on. He believed Germany was collapsing faster than anyone wanted to admit. And he believed the worst mistake now would be to ease up. As the sun set on March 29th, the roads were still packed with prisoners. Trucks moved endlessly, carrying captured men to temporary holding areas. Guards rotated through the night. The scale of the surrender would take days to fully process. But the message was already clear. One night, 50,000 prisoners. A war that suddenly felt like it was racing toward an ending no one could stop. And yet, the most important reaction was still unfolding far from the battlefield, inside Eisenhower's mind, where admiration, concern, and responsibility collided. What he said about Patton that night would reflect not just one operation, but the uneasy balance between control and chaos that defined the final weeks of the war. Eisenhower did not sleep much that night. Supreme Headquarters was used to pressure, but this felt different. Reports kept arriving, each one confirming the same unbelievable reality. Entire German formations were gone, not destroyed in battle, not scattered, gone, captured. Eisenhower read the numbers again and again, making sure there was no mistake. 50,000 prisoners in less than a day was not just a tactical success. It was a psychological blow that rippled across the entire Western Front. He knew history would remember moments like this. But he also knew history rarely showed the tension behind them. Eisenhower carried the weight of an alliance that stretched across oceans. British, American, French, and other Allied forces all depended on coordination, trust, and control. Patton, brilliant as he was, constantly tested the limits of that control. And yet, here was the proof. When unleashed, Patton could shatter an enemy faster than anyone else. Eisenhower's comment about Patton was not made for the newspapers. It was not meant to boost morale or build legends. It was a private acknowledgement among professionals. He reportedly said that Patton was doing exactly what he was meant to do on the battlefield, even if it made headquarters uncomfortable. In simple terms, Eisenhower understood that Patton's aggression had shortened the war in that sector. It had spared American lives, and it had accelerated the collapse of German resistance in central Germany. But Eisenhower also understood something else. This kind of success could tempt a commander to push even harder, even faster, without regard for political boundaries or coalition strategy. The war was not just about defeating Germany anymore, it was about how the war would end, who would occupy which territories, and how the post-war world would look. Speed was a weapon, but it could also become a liability. Patton did not concern himself with those questions. On the morning after the mass surrender, he was already pressing his corps commanders to move east. Town names replaced prisoner counts on his maps. Fulda, Gotha, Eisenach. Each name represented another step toward the heart of Germany. Patton believed that hesitation now would allow the enemy to regroup, even in defeat. He wanted relentless pressure until the last organized resistance collapsed. The men of Third Army felt it too. There was a strange energy in the air. The fighting was still dangerous, but something had shifted. German resistance no longer felt solid. It felt thin, brittle, ready to crack at any moment. Units surrendered after brief skirmishes. Bridges were taken intact. Towns fell with little or no resistance. The enemy was running out of will. Captured German officers told the same story during interrogations. They spoke of confusion, exhaustion, and the shock of American speed. Many had believed they could retreat, reorganize, and continue fighting deeper inside Germany. Patton's night movement shattered that belief, and roads they expected to use were blocked. Orders they expected never arrived. What felt like a controlled withdrawal turned into a trap overnight. For Eisenhower, this confirmed something he had suspected for weeks. Germany was not just losing, it was collapsing unevenly. Some sectors still fought hard, especially where fanatic leadership remained. But in places where pressure was constant and overwhelming, resistance melted away. Patton's capture of 50,000 prisoners was the clearest sign yet that the end was not months away. It was weeks, maybe days. Still, Eisenhower made sure to rein Patton in just enough. Boundaries were reinforced. Coordination with other Allied armies was emphasized. Not because Patton had done something wrong on the battlefield, but because the political shape of victory mattered now as much as the military one. Eisenhower had to think beyond the next town or river. He had to think about what came after the guns fell silent. Patton resented the limits, but he obeyed them, at least on paper. In practice, he continued to drive his army forward with the same intensity. He believed that hesitation was more dangerous than risk. His diary entries from this period reflect a man convinced that Germany was finished and that any pause would only prolong suffering. To Patton, mercy came from speed, not caution. As April 1945 began, the consequences of that one night became even clearer. German units west of the Elbe were surrendering in waves. Supply depots were captured untouched. Communications collapsed. The psychological impact of the mass surrender spread faster than any Allied broadcast. German soldiers heard rumours of entire armies giving up without a fight. Morale, already low, fell even further. American soldiers, many of them veterans of Normandy, the Ardennes, and months of hard fighting, felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Some joked darkly about finally running out of enemies to shoot. Others remained cautious, knowing how quickly things could turn deadly. But everyone understood they were witnessing the end of something massive and terrible. Eisenhower watched it all unfold, with the calm of a man who knew his decisions would be judged long after the war was over. His words about Patton reflected that balance. He did not romanticize him. He did not condemn him. He recognized him as a tool of war, sharp and dangerous, armed but effective when used at the right moment. The capture of 50,000 Germans in one night was that moment. When Berlin fell to the Soviets weeks later and Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7, 1945, the night Patton sealed that pocket in March stood out as a turning point. It was not the largest surrender of the war, but it was one of the most sudden. It showed how quickly a modern army could collapse when speed, coordination, and pressure were applied without mercy. For Patton, it was just another entry in a long list of victories. He moved on quickly, already focused on new dangers he believed were coming. For Eisenhower, it was proof that the war had entered its final, unstable phase, where discipline and restraint mattered as much as aggression. And for history, it became a reminder of how wars often end. It's not always with dramatic final battles. Sometimes with a single night, a closed road, and tens of thousands of men realizing all at once that the fight is over. You can almost imagine it now, the cold morning light, the endless columns of prisoners, the silence where gunfire had once echoed. In that silence, Eisenhower understood what Patton had accomplished, and in that silence, the end of the war in Europe came into view, closer than ever before. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.